Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, I don't know about you, Curtis, but green fields are back and the snow is gone for the time being. So, it's looking a little bit better out there today.
It is, yes, yeah. The white stuff's gone. The sky's grey, but we're here, we're back, and we've got loads of headlines.
People can get in the cars now. Yeah. We have, and we've got an absolute stormer of a midweek to kick off 2025 this week, and that was one that we were fingers crossed it was going to come off, and it did, luckily. Fantastic midweek interview, didn't we?
Yes, yeah, and it's something we've been working on for quite a few weeks, if not a couple of months, because we caught up with, and I know you're a big fan of his, and you sort of brought him to my attention, a fellow podcaster called Michael Dunne, who's based in the States, and he's the leading light behind the Driving with Dunne podcast. But as well as being a podcaster, he's an industry commentator, he's a keynote speaker, he's a fluent Mandarin speaker, and probably most importantly, a leading authority on Chinese EV brands.
He is, yeah. I mean, he's an advisor. I mean, he runs Dunne Insights, and manufacturers, dealers, private equity. They use him to understand what the market looks like going forward, in particular Chinese manufacturers and their strategies, and obviously with what's going on in the US, he advises a lot with that. So, yeah, but he is, they say, we don't want to spoil it too much, but he is an authority on Chinese OEMs, their strategies and their philosophy on business as well. And as Curtis said there, he did spend 4 years learning fluent Mandarin. Yes. Which the snippet today might give you a flavour of that, which I've managed to take out of the full interview that was shared earlier on this week, which we always advise, if you've not listened to that already, then do find it on your podcast feed, because it was really focusing on, he was at the CES over in Las Vegas, the Customer Electronics Show, which I think people are now saying renaming it Chinese Electronics Show.
Yeah.
A fantastic interview there with Michael.
Yeah, and the significance of that is the Consumer Electronics Show. It started many years ago purely for things like flat TV screens, LED TVs, mobile phones and computer tech. But over more recent years, a lot of the OEMs, especially the Chinese OEMs, have targeted the CES show to highlight, showcase and launch new products. So Michael was there last week, and he actually talked about what his impressions were, what he saw, what was making the news out of the show. So it's all very, very topical.
Yeah, that was before he heads over to New Orleans.
Yes.
23rd, I think it is, of January. For 2 or 3 days, there is the NADA, which is at New Orleans this year. So I'm sure we'll hear all about that in due course. We'll get feedback, and hopefully we'll get somebody on to talk us about what they found and their takeaways from NADA in one of our future midweek interviews there. But so Michael is very fast going from CES and then now over to New Orleans. But obviously he's based in Southern California, so slightly easier for him than many of our UK and European colleagues.
Yeah, and there will be a large UK contingent going out to New Orleans. I've noticed on LinkedIn a lot of people are posting that they're going over there. So it'd be interesting to get some feedback on how it goes. As you say, it starts on Thursday. It's in New Orleans, and that was always my favourite NADA show. I probably went 3 or 4 times. It's a brilliant event. New Orleans, obviously, been in the news recently for all the wrong reasons. So we're hoping that this is a return to some form of normality for the city, because it's such a welcoming place, and the NADA New Orleans tends to coincide with the build up to Mardi Gras, so there's such a good party atmosphere there. So if you are heading out there, let us know how you get on.
Yeah, and just before we get on to the headlines, we wanted to pick a story out of AM Online, and this is inspiring automotive women winners announced for 2025. And this is from the Automotive 30% Club. And also, they've highlighted some of the highly skilled HR executives and women in technical and technological leadership roles within the automotive sector. So, I think this is fantastic work that they're doing over at the Automotive 30% Club. And some well-worthy winners there in the list.
Yeah, and the nominations were made through the Inspiring Automotive Women Who Inspires You LinkedIn campaign, which was run last year, and was, it looks as though the input, the feedback was incredibly positive and high, because they had over 500 nominations for the awards from companies within and actually beyond the Automotive 30% Club. So, the great response there from the industry. And we've got a handful of winners that we'll give shout outs to, but the full list is actually in the AM story, which we'll post on our newsletter. But big shout out to Lynn McBurney from Arnold Clark, Catherine Fayers from Autotrader, and Jessica Montgomery from Virtue Motors Group.
Yeah, and we also Sally Foote from Cara, who I know reasonably well, Nicola Jackson from Close Brothers Motor Finance, a colleague and friend of ours and mine, Sam Panades, who's sales director at Cox Automotive.
And the full list, as I say, is on AM Online. So do head over there, because it's great to see these people. Oh, shit. And also under the special recognition winners, there was Erin Baker from Autotrader and Michelle Briffy from Women Drive Electric, and So the full list is actually on the AM Online website, and we'll post a link to that particular story on the newsletter that goes out on Monday. But a shout out to some of the winners, starting with Lynn McBurney from Arnold Clark, Jessica Montgomery from Virtue Motors, Nicola Jackson from Close Brothers Motor Finance, and Melanie Phillips from DLG Auto Services.
Yeah, and as Curtis said there's a couple of people on there from Cox Automotive, one of them being Sam Panades, who is our sales director at Cox Automotive, friend and a friend of the podcast and colleague. And they've also done a couple of special recognition winners, and the full list, as Curtis said there, is on the AM Online website. So congratulations to everybody that's involved with the 30% Club in the first instance, and especially to those nominated and the winners.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
So, onto the headlines, and headlines this week come from AM, Car Dealer, Business Live, and BBC News, starting with industry veteran takes the helm at Marshall Motors. Arnold Clark acquires Northeast-based Wingrove Motor Company. Acquisitive Hedin Group blames agency and economic slowdown for UK losses in latest year ends. Dealer Auction reveals the best performing used cars by dealer margin. And we'll look at why Norway is the first European country to be on track to go all electric.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. If you're a supplier and would like us to profile your business and reach our audience of dealer bosses, managers and decision makers on one of our dedicated supplier specials episodes, get in touch with Curtis and Philip at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
And probably just worth mentioning, some of the supplier specials that we've run over recent months include MTC, Jig Car, Check Quick, Car Care and Auto Chat. So if you'd like us to profile your business, then just get in touch with Philip or myself. We're both on LinkedIn.
So get on to the headlines there. And the first one, this was an exclusive for Car Dealer. And I believe, don't know if it mentions it in the story here, Curtis, but I think it was leaked from somebody at Marshall's to Car Dealer, and the headline is that Marshall and Cinch to fall under new Constellation banner as boss Martin Kasher calls it a day. So to say that Martin Kasher is to retire from his post as CEO of Marshall Motor Group at the end of March, and that the businesses will be led by Gary Savage under the new Constellation name, and that both firms will retain their brands as the group shakes up management. I could put a bit of a quip there and say that Martin Kasher's cashed out, but we shouldn't probably do that.
You went there.
I went there. I had to go there. But I know Martin is a great guy. So yeah, I think this is obviously a shake up there, and obviously the Car Dealer have picked up on this, and this was, I think it was actually only covered in Car Dealer, wasn't it, this week?
Yeah, they had the scoop on it, and you're right. It looks as though they got the story from an email that was shared with them, an internal email. So it's interesting development here because it sees former Mercedes boss Gary Savage becoming the CEO and supported by James Mullins as CFO, and the business will implement a new Constellation retail division, which will include both the Cinch and Marshall businesses. So some sort of internal housekeeping there as well. And it looks though the Marshall and Cinch brands will remain and come under a new banner as part of that process. And as we said, the news was broken to staff last week, and this is how Car Dealer got the story. And they actually quote the email within the story and saying that Martin Kasher joined Marshall Motor Group in 2023 with the objective of leading the business to a position of readiness to initiate the next phase of growth within the framework of Constellation. And that's what's happening with these new appointments there.
Yeah, he's worked as well as Rachel Reeves. I think the last financials were down 62% to 16.4 million, down from 42.9 million the year before. So yeah, you've got a question is what's been happening there, but I'm sure we'll hear a lot more from this in due course. And then heading over next, we're going over to Business Live. And this is a story that I think I'm not sure it's picked up greatly, but actually there's a bit of something in this because we haven't heard from Arnold Clark for a while, there was a point in which it was constantly in the headlines, weren't the Arnold Clarks, with acquisitions and growth, and we haven't heard anything. But in December of last year, Tyneside Car Group, Wingrove Motor Company, bought by national giant Arnold Clarks, and that the business operated 4 centres in the northeast, including a showroom in Silverlink, North Tyneside and Fenham, Newcastle, a body shop in Crablington, I'm not sure if I'm pronounced that correctly, and a prep centre in Shearmore in North Tyneside. So quite a significant acquisition there by Arnold Clark's up in the northeast.
Yeah, definitely. So, northeast-based business, established in 1925, interestingly by Newcastle cattle auctioneer John Dawkin. And as you say, operated across 4 sites, very well-respected business in the local area. The acquisition has led to the closure of Wingrove's Fenham site, but this story here from Business Live says that all 97 staff members, including those from the closed Newcastle site, have been transferred as part of this acquisition, and Arnold Clark has reassured customers and employees that it will be business as usual with all services continuing, but obviously under the new name of Arnold Clark. So this is probably the last acquisition of last year, and certainly the first we've reported on this year.
I think, I think that's the significance with this. I think we thought that there would be some last minute acquisitions taking place last year, and there's probably more in the first quarter this year before the April budget financials start to impact the sector. So I think this is key, and obviously the fact that it's demonstrating Arnold Clark's growth ambitions again. It's quite a significant acquisition there. So yeah, one we'll certainly try and keep an eye on. And heading over to AM Online now, the Hedin Automotive reports losses remains optimistic on future growth. And this is the Hedin Automotive, subsidiary of Swedish-based Hedin Mobility Group, has recorded a loss-making performance in its latest trading statement. Now, this is their financial period year ending December 2023, but there is a bit of a significance with this because it's citing the agency model, isn't it, on this?
Yeah, it's citing agency model along with the economic slowdown, and curiously, a 2-week closure period for staff training on a new dealer management system, which I've never seen that in financial results before. Have you?
No, I haven't. No, it's it's not something you would normally do. If anything, you want to keep open for longer hours. I mean, it's but do you know what? We're in a different world now, aren't we, than what I operated in.
And looking at the financials, so this is for the year ended 31st December 2023. So Hedin reported turnover of £211 million with a gross profit of 31.6 million. However, operating losses totaled 4 million with pre-tax losses of 7.6 million. And within the financials, there's a statement from Hedin that says, as we move into 2024, bearing in mind this is for the 2023 calendar year, we anticipate more stability despite the prevailing economic uncertainties. While we have faced significant operational and financial hurdles, we believe the foundations are now in place for a stronger performance in 2024.
Yeah, so I say this is probably, I mean, we are starting to see a few of the 2023 trading announcements still come out. And I think there's still a few that haven't been declared yet. So there's a lot of these dealer groups holding back their financials for the year end in 2023 there. And there's probably, some of the early ones in 2024 as well. So I think we're getting towards the end of these now. But I think clearly, 2023 was a fairly unique trading period on the back of 2022 and the strength that we saw in 2022. I think the key now is when we start to see and hear 2024 trading as we move through this year. We'll keep a close eye on what's happening with Hedin Automotive. But next, we're going to take a break and we'll let you listen to a brief extract, as we said right at the start of the show, from Michael Dunne, who is, as Curtis said, it's an exclusive interview there with Michael, US analyst, podcaster, keynote speaker, fluent Mandarin speaker, and is everything about Chinese OEMs.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed.
I've been warning them for a while, and I think they're now starting to realise that what you were talking about many years ago, what to watch out for and what's on the horizon, is actually now here, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. We've heard about technology taking over, software taking over, and it's real. At the show, if we can talk about the show for a moment, center stage was this brand called Zeekr, that's Generation Z Seeker, a subsidiary of Geely, which of course bought the Volvo brand, bought Lotus, owns a partnership in Proton, and now has developed this beautiful young baby called Zeekr, sedans, vans, and a partnership with Waymo where they customize vehicles for Waymo use globally. So Zeekr was sort of the star of the show. There were others there, but just to give you a feeling, walking the floor of the show, funny thing happened on the first day. You know, we've all been to those shows, and after you walked a few miles, you get a little bit like, boy, I'd kill for an espresso. So I'm walking by one of the Chinese automaker stands, and I happen to see, oh, good, look at that. They've got an espresso machine and a couple of young ladies behind ready to help out. So I started to move, and my ears, of course, are perked up. I start to move in their direction, and I hear in Chinese, one of them say to the other, oh no, here comes another foreigner looking for free coffee. And in Chinese, just for the benefit of people out there, Chinese, it was, 又来了一个外国人想喝咖啡. So I just thought that was a delicious moment, and I walked up and smiled and said to them, excuse me, and then I just repeated back what I had heard them say.
And that's is that the point?
Yeah. Each other just wanted to crawl into the floor in embarrassment. But
is that the point that all those years of learning Mandarin paid off in one go?
I was waiting for that moment. It was perfect. Like, if I don't do anything, if a bus hits me tomorrow, I've accomplished a mission.
You've done it. Yeah. It's all paid off. All your learnings and schooling paid off just in that one moment in time.
Now, one, and I know our time is short with lots to cover, but one interesting, like fascinating thing that if you noticed, they said a foreigner wants, here comes another foreigner who wants coffee. Chinese people are the only people I know of who can be in a foreign country and still call the natives foreigners. That's how strong their culture is. So, yeah, that was what was happening.
Back to CES. I mean, you know, you talk about the flavour of that, you know, the CES, the rebrand. I mean, why do you think it is now, you know, one of the sort of the more important shows of the year? You know, we've got NADA coming up in the next week or so. There's been others. I mean, car makers now really are at the CES, and your opening point is really technology is at the forefront of everything that's happening.
That's right. The script has been transformed totally. So we know for 100 years it was the art of manufacturing vehicles, pounding metal into shape with glass and rubber and the rest, and just sculpturing a beautiful vehicle that we would drive or ride in. That was the Bible. That was the script. And now it's changed. It's an overused term, but it's actually true. Is we're driving computers that happen to sit on wheels, and as Li Shufu of Geely calls it, a couple sofas. So you've got a computer system, software powering that system, batteries, battery management systems, all that technology is just taking over the car. And this is really causing what do you call it? Disruption doesn't even
Mm.
begin to describe it. Like an earthquake. The solid ground on which European American automakers, Japanese had worked for so long, for decades, is suddenly, oh my goodness, it's moving underneath our feet, and we don't have any. What's going on here? It's a shock.
And in terms of what caught your eye, I mean, we see some of the feedback coming out of some of the manufacturers, the OEMs that were there, the car makers that were there. But from your perspective, in the world of technology and what we're looking out for, what's caught your eye in terms of tech and product that is set to come this sort of year or so from some of these car makers?
The number one takeaway theme, I'd say, was AI. Everything was AI. Everything was algorithms, making that digital experience inside the car better than ever. So, for example, you approach your car, you no longer the key. No, we don't use keys anymore. We're using a card or some other facial ID. Cars open up. Then you get in the car. How seamlessly can you move from your phone to the car? That's the biggest challenge facing automakers today. And then navigation, how quick and how accurate is navigation, infotainment. It's really become, when we're at home, we're on the couch flipping through our phone. When we're in the car, how is that interaction between all the digital components and the autonomous driving and the people inside the car? That's really the theme of the show. And to contrast that, if we went to an auto show 10 years ago, it was, how's the performance of this vehicle? How's it handle the corners, the braking, the acceleration, the fit and finish? What about the panel gaps? No one seems to be paying attention to that anymore. It's all about the digital experience, for better or for worse. I love driving cars, but I have to recognize that the world has moved on, and the younger generation loves that digital experience. So that was really the centerpiece of the show. Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, who makes the chips that power much of this digital experience, he was the keynote speaker. And it was like automakers are almost the new suppliers. It's the technologies at the top of the hill, automakers a notch down, and then your old school suppliers like Lear and Bosch and Denso are sort of hanging on. What about us? Is there a role for us in the future?
I don't know about you, Curtis. I mean, that extract just gives you an absolute flavour of the sort of 30, 40 minutes that we had with Michael. And trying to cover quite a bit with Michael Weiss, we had his attention. But I mean, the what his view is there of the tech now driving the automotive car maker sector. The manufacturers now are making the bodies and the chassis to support the tech. The tech are at the centre of everything going forward.
Yeah, and I think he quotes someone as saying that the way EVs are looked at now, it's a computer on wheels, which really does put everything into perspective. And some fascinating insights there, not just from the CES show, but he does go on to talk about the impact of Chinese manufacturers across global markets, specifically Europe. And I also asked him about America, which was fascinating because they can't get into America because of existing tariffs. And that's as we record that's before Donald Trump takes over once again as president, because he said where he lives, which is very much on the border between South California and Mexico, the only Chinese cars he'll see are the ones that have come across from Mexico, not local ones, not American ones.
Yeah, and he talked about the recent sanctions that this also tariffs apply to the supply chain, not just the final produced vehicles. So again, lot to cover. We didn't have the time to talk politics or Tesla with Michael, but hopefully we'll do that again in the future. So again, Michael, if you are listening this morning, then huge thank you for your time, and have a fantastic time in NADA. So let's get back to the final headlines of the week and back over to AM Online. Ford Kuga tops retail margin performance with BMW, the brand to watch in 2025. And this is that the Ford Kuga topped Dealer Auction's retail margin monitor for the profit opportunity in the sub 10,000 retail bracket in 2024. And the BMW brand has been highlighted as the one to watch in 2025.
So this is based on data produced by the Retail Margin Monitor, which identifies the highest retail margins seen on used vehicles bought via the dealer auction wholesale platform. And this is monitored on a monthly basis. Now, it's been relatively consistent throughout 2024 in terms of the top 10 performers, with either the Land Rover Discovery Sport or Range Rover Evoque taking the top spots each month. But this really does shed light on the performance of some of the other brands, and the Ford Kuga in particular is listed to have a average retail margin in December of £2,250, with an average day to sell of 33 days. So the Ford Kuga tops a list that also includes the likes of the Kia Sportage, Peugeot 2006 and BMW 1 Series. So fascinating insight there into some of the best performers by margin.
Yeah, you're right, and I think this is now obviously becoming a must-read result every month now coming out of dealer auction. There, just to sort of highlight those profitable vehicles, and obviously the speed to sell. Obviously, when that vehicle goes through the system there. So again, I think what they do to highlight in the story here is that they've broken it into the sub 10,000 and over 10,000 bracket, because we know that sub 10k market is a market in demand at the minute through the wholesale sector there. So again, to get a little bit more detail on that story, then do head over to AM Online. We have our final story, and we're heading over to a nice little story on the BBC News. I'm going back into the more European global market now, but Norway on track to be the first go all-electric country. So we know that Norway has always been a leader in sustainability and the transition to EV, but this is a very in-depth research story, isn't it, that the BBC have done with Adrian Murray there, that has spent some time over in Norway interviewing people across the market there and talking to them about this transition to EV.
Yeah, it's a great feature actually, because what they report on is some thoughts from some of the dealers in Norway, some of the actual customers and politicians, and really setting the scene as to where Norway is in relation to the rest of the world. And I went to Oslo on. It was a Nissan Leaf launch, which must have been about 12 years ago, something like that. And even back then, you could see how far advanced the country was in terms of EV infrastructure, in that there were charging points all over the city. There was preferential parking for EVs, and also the volume of cars on the roads. And so this is really an update on that, and it's quite interesting because they cite one particular dealer, which is Harold Moller, which has been operating in Oslo for 75 years, and it's been importing Volkswagens. But early last year, it stopped selling any ICE vehicles and has gone totally over to EVs. And the dealership says there, we think it's wrong to advise a customer coming in here today to buy an ICE car, because the future is electric. And goes on to say that long range, high charging speed it's hard to go back now. And that's very much the mindset. And the piece goes on to say that on the streets of Oslo, battery-powered cars aren't a novelty. They're the norm, which they were, as I say, 10, 12 years ago. Take a look around and you'll soon notice that almost every other car has an E for electric on its license plate.
Yeah, and they're going to say that last year the number of EVs on Norway roads outnumbered those powered by petrol for the first time. When diesel vehicles are included, electric cars account for almost a third of all on Norwegian roads, and this an 88.9% of new cars sold in the country last year were EVs, and that's an increase from 82.4% in 2023, and that's data from the Norwegian Road Federation over there. And that in some months, sales of fully electric cars were as high as 98%, as petrol or diesel car purchase almost fizzled out. And obviously they're comparing to the UK, which we know accounted for only 20% last year, and the US that accounts for just 8% last year, an increase from the year before from 7.6%. So again, highlighting the direction, but they do say this started in the 90s. So this is, they really did get on this direction of shift and transition very early, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. And they started by incentivizing EV ownership. So as well as favorable tax breaks, there's a whole string of perks like free parking, discounted road tolls, and access to bus lanes, certainly within the cities. And also, rather than banning ICE vehicles outright, the government has steered consumer choices. So in addition to penalising fossil fuel vehicles with higher taxes and registration fees, it's also increased VAT and import duties were scrapped for low emission cars. So there's very much carrot and stick going on in Norway, which explains why it's so far ahead of all other European countries, especially the UK, let's be honest.
Let's hope that somebody within the UK government who's looking at the consultation, the priority ZEV mandate consultation, has had a quick look at this story.
Yeah, should we send this to
our
friend Karen Moon?
Yes, exactly. Yes. Exactly. So again, good detail in there, and they've done a great research piece in some of the interviewing and what's been happening over there. But again, that's it for this week. I mean, hopefully the snippet there from the interview with industry legend Michael Dunne gives you a flavour of what's in the full interview. If you've not listened to the full interview that was shared with you on Thursday of this week, do head over to your podcast feed and have a full listen to that interview, and hopefully we'll hear more from Michael later on in the year.
Yeah, most definitely. The studio door is left open for him. We've got a lot more to catch up with him on, so he will be back. But that's all for this week. So many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. As Philip says, do check out that full interview with Michael Dunne, which will be in your podcast feed. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.